Well, Christ, would you guys believe it? It has been almost a month since the previous Q&A. Man, what happened in February? Seriously, it moved so quickly. I'm planning on doing a Patreon Q&A as well pretty soon. But let's have a regular one. We did just recently put out a Guild Wars 2 Mysteries video. I had a lot of people asking me, hey, this seems like a cool new thing. What's going on? Are we going to be seeing more? You guys are. If you haven't been watching in the comments and so on, the only reason I brought it back was because I do have about 5 or 6 at least interesting enough ideas for contemporary cool mysteries. The problem with the series before was I kind of exhausted all of the truly interesting topics in my mind. Anything else you do would be a stretch. It's like saying, oh, I believe that Lion's Arch is going to be eventually brought under control of Newt Whitebear and the Norn are going to rule the world. And then you basically just fabricate completely ridiculous conspiracy level stuff just to make that narrative work. I wanted to avoid that, and so maybe you don't realize, but that series went away. If you guys didn't know, that's not the first episode of it. There's been others, but it's been away for like a year or so. And so, yeah, that is not the only change that you guys will have noticed. Videos are a little bit different now. We had about 2 weeks of just darkness on the channel in terms of GW2 videos and just crazy work on my end to sort out a bunch of back-end stuff. We've got a new intro, we've got end slates, all the videos are now being produced in 1440p. I'm not going to bang on about this for ages, but just so that you guys know, even if you only have a 1920 by 1080p monitor, which is what I would expect most people to be using their PCs on, this really doesn't apply to people on mobile. But if you are using a PC to watch the videos and that's your resolution, you should click 1440p anyway when you see it. So this is half the reason I'm doing it, because what that does is YouTube will give you a higher bandwidth version of the video and it will macro block less. Basically, you'll get less artifacts from the constraints of YouTube's very, very low bitrate that it affords people, just by going to 1440p, even if you don't have that size monitor. But if you're watching this in the 360p club, I can tell you it will be a long-ass time before that 1440 appears, but it will be there on the videos from now on, so I'm very happy. Audio quality actually went up as well, but anyway, I could rant about that for ages. There is actually a post right now up on Patreon. There's a post on Reddit if you're interested in like a patch notes version of all the things that I've had going on, and that's why it's been a little while, I guess, in the end, such a long time for a Q&A video. I would reiterate as well, just for what it's worth, X2 isn't replacing any Guild Wars 2 content. If there wasn't a Guild Wars 2 video in a certain day, there are only 2 reasons why that might happen. Number 1, I'm really busy doing other things, like this kind of makeover-ish style thing we've done here. Or number 2, I have no inspiration for a video. Right, like, I will be fairly lenient with the topics I'll put stuff up on, but if I don't have a really interesting idea or any inspiration, I don't do a video for that reason. It's not like a question of one thing being replaced for another. If I wasn't doing X2, Woodenpotatoes would have had very, very, very little content going out at all. So, yeah, I'll probably be having to say that till I'm blue in the face, and people still won't get it. But hey, whatever. Anyway, let's get on to the questions. I just wanted to do a bit of a vloggy style thing there for you guys to keep you in the loop. First one here is from JB, who actually asked 5 days ago, in a comment to some of the stuff we were talking about in the previous episodes. In the previous episode, I put forward an idea of where the story could go, not because I necessarily think it's good, or not because I necessarily think it does justice to the Elder Dragon idea and so on, but because it is a possible story they could go on to push us out of the Elder Dragon realm really quickly, right? Like, Guild Wars 2 is locked into this idea, oh, we have to fight these big scary dragons all the time, and this idea pushes us out of that super fast, and we move on to, you know, greener pastures in theory. And this, of course, involves Elder Dragons fighting one another. I don't think it's an accident Arena have mentioned so many times that Elder Dragons can battle and they will fight, and they're like apex predators that if they end up in each other's regions, each other's territory, something might happen. I don't think that's an accident they've said that, and it is a theoretical thing that can happen. But someone said this in response to that: the only problem I find with the 2 Elder Dragons battle each other concept is that if one dies right in front of the other, won't the other surviving Elder Dragon just immediately suck up the energy magic from the dead Elder Dragon? Because in that case, you're going to have an Elder Dragon with twice the potency. It's an interesting idea, like the proximity of 2 dragons being close to one another, they fight each other, and then one becomes super powerful. But here's the thing, I don't really think that what you say there is a problem with the Elder Dragons fighting each other idea. I actually think that what can you do to make your Elder Dragon climactic battle at the end of an expansion where they're fighting each other even more epic, well, you can have when one dies, the other one becomes like supercharged. The funny thing is, it kind of makes me think of Zhaitan, right? Like the Zhaitan fight had him exploding halfway through the battle and then like getting supercharged and having all the red stuff on him, and he was kind of interesting for a little while. We had no equivalent for Morgemoth, and you'd have like Primordus versus the Deep Sea Dragon. Deep Sea Dragon wins and then goes, Super Saiyan Dragon mode. It could happen, but then the other side of the discussion here too is we don't actually know in very definite terms exactly how fast and how readily Elder Dragons can eat magic from one another. We don't even have consistency before that on how magic is released from an Elder Dragon's death. And this is, in my opinion, because ArenaNet didn't have all the pieces of the puzzle set, and obviously the Zhaitan fight was so rushed. But there is an extraordinary difference between the Morgemoth death and Zhaitan. Morgemoth like explodes in a nuke, and we get this cutscene. Zhaitan, there was nothing of the sort. Zhaitan just fell down the tower, and we didn't really get anything else. You would have thought, at least somewhere, even if we the players didn't see it because the battle was unfinished, NPCs would have referenced some kind of, nuke-style explosion once he went. Like that is such a key part of the story that it's just not there. The whole Zhaitan, how did the tail end up in the Dermid Priory, for example, of Zhaitan? This specific thing, the confirmation of Zhaitan's death, we really need. But so we don't have consistency there. And then further, what have we actually seen in terms of things absorbing magic? We have the end cutscene from Heart of Thorns. We perhaps also have the cutscene from the destruction of Lion's Arch and the Breachmaker and Scarlet's death, where we see the ley line be diverted and we see an Elder Dragon wake up. Presumably we're watching him eat magic there. But then what else do we have? Not too much. We have, a Living World update where Tequatl was stronger and we just had some dialogue. You didn't see Tequatl eating any magic. So, let's go back to the original idea. Two Elder Dragons are fighting one another. One of them dies. What happens straight away? Is there an explosion of magic? Okay, let's say that there is an explosion of magic. Who's to say the other, and I'll point out, weak Elder Dragon, who's already been in a battle, is ready to absorb a giant explosion of magic like that? Let's not forget as well, this is all thoroughly reminiscent of Guild Wars 1, when Abaddon was destroyed, and he was exploding into a giant nuke that threatened to collapse and destroy everything, but Cormair just simply had to run into this big white ball of energy, sacrificing herself, and then she absorbed it and came out. So would the Elder Dragon do a similar thing? Can I do a similar thing? Can I become a god now, ArenaNet? Can I become an Elder Dragon? That's really the only reason I'm playing Guild Wars 2. Well, we'll have to see. Next question is from MBLMG2, who said, "Hey WP, can you do an Ara explorable lore video?" I guess this is because of the recent mysteries we did, where I referenced the information we got from Path 1, the Zhaitan path, where we find the mystical telescope that looked into the heavens and seems to show an Elder Dragon being a star-ish sort of turning into a black hole. Now, this is something people have asked me a lot, but I'm just going to be the bringer of bad news here. And it's a brief answer. No, I'm not going to do it. It would be great. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of really important lore in Ara, and a lot of people miss it. It's kind of one of those funny things, actually. A good case study for those who don't want to see lore in the raids, because so few people really know what happens in Ara Explorable, and it's basically the only dungeon, in my opinion, story and explorable modes combined, that really pushed the story in some interesting directions. But I'm just faced with the fact I'm not, as a content creator, very excited about the idea of making those videos, so I'm probably not going to. Next question is from Gunarg SOM, who said, "Hey WP, when Heart of Thorns came out, so did new legendaries. I made the Bifrost a couple of days before it came out, and I didn't realize how cool Nevermore is. If you had the chance to replace the Bifrost or any of the other old legendaries for one of the new ones, would I?" Well, there's a couple of stipulations to a question like this. First of all, there's the, well, obviously, because the new legendaries are more contemporary and have more prestige, not even equal prestige to previous legendaries. These have more. I could, in theory, just spend a ton of money on the gem store and buy an old generation legendary straight out, but Nevermore, I couldn't do that, so it kind of proves that I play the game. But to be honest with you, I'd probably trade even if the prestige thing wasn't a factor. So, for example, ArenaNet 4 years ago, almost now, think about that, 3.5 years ago, they released Guild Wars 2, and there are already 2 different versions of every weapon out there for a legendary. There's a Bifrost and there's the Trifrost, okay? And then, and so on, just like we had with the Great Swords with Twilight and Sunrise. Fast forward the clock to today, I would trade my Bifrost for a Trifrost, just because it's different, and I like the flavor of it being different every now and then. But then there is the downside of the fact, I guess, if I did this, I wouldn't be able to experience any of the collections anymore, and I wouldn't actually be able to experience the progression. And I do believe that is a huge part of the Legendary experience now. I think a lot of us older players, and especially ones like me who haven't even dived into it just yet, it's easy to forget about that. You know, a lot of people say, oh, how hard is it to add the rest of the Legendary weapons? We are now half a year almost since Heart of Thorn's release, and we still only have 3 Legendary weapons. Like, what is that team working on? What are they doing? They told us ages ago that they had a lot of the concepts and visual effects and things in, and I guess the point is that so much of it is the collections and the progression to go forward. I actually had an interesting theory. It's sort of inclined to believe that ArenaNet thought people would like the Legendary collections and the scavengers a lot more than they eventually did. Think about it, for 2 years the community is begging ArenaNet, please give us a non-Mystic Forge way of getting Legendaries. Please, we want scavenge hunts. Yeah, we want lore-based questing to get towards them. So ArenaNet like, sure, we'll listen, and then they put them out, and people still aren't happy because it still takes them a lot of effort to grind and get the farm and so on. I am kind of on the people's side here, though, because I really do not believe that collections are a very good substitute for proper questing and immersive-based crafting and scavenging of collecting a Legendary weapon, like we saw ArenaNet did back in Guild Wars 1 with the Black Moa, Chick, Hunt, and like we see basically in every other game out there that doesn't have this weird, dodgy thing that they have to avoid traditional quests. So anyway, the idea is that because the community didn't like the Legendary collections as much as ArenaNet thought they would because they were asking for it for 2 years, now they're trying to change it up again for the new ones, and that's why it's taken a while. Either way, I don't really know. Before we diverge from the question too far, yes, I'd trade my Legendary for one of the new ones, and yes, I would choose to skip out on all the grind and all of that stuff, absolutely. Next question is from Shopping Stew. This is a funny one to me. Question, I think you mentioned in one of the much older Q&As that your Guild Wars 1 account was in fact originally your brother's. Following that, you mentioned that your brother wasn't really into Guild Wars anymore, and by the time Guild Wars 2 launched, he therefore didn't play it. Has he, to this date, played Guild Wars 2? This is a weird question. Well remembered. You're absolutely right. My account was originally my brother's. Finally, I did a video where I was playing PvP with World of Enders, and there were a surprising number of people saying, oh, you could get banned for this because it's account sharing. I don't believe that I could get banned for that whatsoever. I don't believe ArenaNet can test or figure out when people are doing that. The system I used, by the way, to produce that video, it was NVIDIA Game Stream, which is available on their more recent drivers, that allows you to basically couch co-op play any game you like. That's how I'm playing Unravel on the Visual Wood channel at the moment with Matt Visual 2, and I don't believe ArenaNet have some way of moderating against that, and I also believe that over the coming years, you're going to see more and more people start doing this. It's a really fun way to play the game, and as the latency drops lower and lower, as general internet infrastructure throughout the world improves and we get better internet in general, we're going to see that this happens more. ArenaNet can't stop that, and really that rule in the end-user license agreement is there to stop people, I think it specifically references this, it's there to stop people giving their account to others online that they pay, and then, you know, like getting them to power level or to farm for you and stuff. Things that Guild Wars 2 really doesn't even have to safeguard that too hard against, in my opinion. But I've heard of that for so long, this happening with Guild Wars 2. I remember the first year in the Halloween Clock Tower, people were giving their accounts to each other in one of my old guilds just so that people could climb the tower and complete it for one another. And, you know, that can't be detected by ArenaNet easily, and it's not that harmful, it's not that malicious, and that is way far of a bigger infringement than, you know, me actively, like, double team playing with a friend in PvP. Anyway, I think the time I truly did infringe on this quite majorly was years ago, back when I played Guild Wars 1. My older brother technically bought the account, owned the account, it was his, and so that I didn't have to buy it, okay, this is where Arena loses their money, this could be why it's in there. I had a couple of characters on his account. We shared that account, and then eventually he got a real life and a real job, and he moved on and became a successful human being. And I kept playing the game, so it became my account, and you know, I think that was more major than anything else. Anyway, no, he's not played Guild Wars 2. I can't actually imagine him understanding a damn thing about it. It would be like two completely distinct, disparate worlds of my life colliding if someone like that ended up starting playing Guild Wars 2 and I found myself explaining stuff like Ascended gear to him and so on. I believe the last time he played the franchise was when he was helping me record a video for the old Guild Wars Factions Let's Play, where I had two of my characters being played at once, and you can actually see some of his gameplay back there. If you go to Factions, somewhere around episode 20, I guess, and then a little bit later in Eye of the North too, he also helped out there. The first couple of episodes or so. Anyway, hopefully that answers your question satisfactorily. Next question is from Nicholas 201120000. Great name. Who says, hey WP, do you think that in Living World Season 3 we will get to go to Zhaitan's corpse in order to perhaps cleanse ore? I picked this question to segue into our discussions earlier. I completely believe that this is a key thing we need more information on, but I don't know whether we're really going to see it. At the very least, our best guidance, our best understanding of where Living World is going to go comes from that little summary they gave us several months back, and that basically said nothing to do with Zhaitan at all. I can't imagine us going to ore super fast. I do think they have the technology for it, and hopefully it's somewhere on the table, but it might have fallen off by now, and it might be somewhere under the desk instead. Next up, JCOG has a theory. I've been recently watching your Guild Wars 1 LP, Speak of the Devil, and I came up with an idea. Basically, what if the offspring of Glint, the one that you were defending in the challenge mission back in Eye of the North, ended up as the Shatterer? I mean, I know that sounds weird, but you also said that it might have been Kraukatorek that impregnated her, and maybe somehow Offspring was corrupted by his father's magics. What's your thoughts on the subject? Okay, the whole, first of all, Glint becoming impregnated. I've never said that I think Kraukatorek impregnated her. For starters, the baby dragons came from eggs. So is that even impregnated? That's more just fertilized, right? Like the eggs were fertilized. But whether something physically did it or it's just, hey, this is magic, corruption magic, and this is how the army is growing or something, I really don't know. Was she fertilized before, back when she was glossed and before she became, you know, corrupted by Kraukatorek? It's a crazy idea. I don't know whether the devs will go into that. But specifically, your whole theory, unfortunately, just doesn't work at all. Because the Shatterer isn't one single entity, okay? The Shatterer, though it sounds singular, the Shatterer is a title, all right? And the Shatterer, there are many of them. They are replaced by Kraukatorek, generated by the brand, by the branded armies. However that happens, we don't know when that happens, where that happens. But the idea is that this is basically just what perhaps the Adamant Guard or the Char that are hanging around in the brand, they just name this big, scary, draconic branded minion that occasionally appears in the brand, the Shatterer. And it's kind of a recurring thing, but it's actually a different creature each time. So maybe you could be right, but the very first Shatterer that the Pact ever killed, or at least the Char in the brand ever killed, that was the death of it. And I think that would have been a really sad, really horrible end for that story. I like to think instead that Gleam has a better story than that, and the baby dragon is still out there and could interact with the new dragon we have as a part of the living world. We could get some interesting things there. But do consider that. You need to consider that with basically all the dragon champions. ArenaNet designed the dynamic events so that they can repeat and still make sense in lore. The next question is from Jafar Jalil, who said, hey WP, on Sahothin's sword. This was something we talked about in the previous Q&A. Why can't we say that the sword simply teleported as the Scepter of Ore did, and Ritlock got it from somewhere else than the Fire Island chain? And with all the things that happened in Heart of Thorns, I wonder what will happen, or what did happen with Magdea. Alright, you could go this angle, but again, this is kind of the insulting, the devs are slapping me in the face, this storyline sucks angle. The entire precedent of this mystery is that Sahothin has always been on the Fire Island chain. The fact that, yes, the Scepter of Ore, also a powerful artifact, as that volcano erupted, was on the Fire Island chain, managed to teleport away, shouldn't mean that, oh, we as the writers can just randomly and magically teleport artifact wherever we want to make our story suit. That's not fair. The Scepter of Ore barely gets away with the fact that happens. The Scepter of Ore, they were only able to write that and have it cool because they'd established the Scepter of Ore as such a mysterious, magical artifact in the first place. And the fact that that final cutscene of Prophecies lingers specifically to show the Scepter leaving makes it a part of the plot. It's not like some Deus Ex Machina they threw in later to tie two loose ends. It's like, hey, this happened, guys. We're showing you it bluntly. This magical artifact has mysteriously vanished. And then they clue us into it again at the end of Eye of the North, where we see Livia with it. I don't think that Zhaitan is on the same level as the Scepter of All. I don't think that it gets that same free pass, right? I think that the Zhaitan had to stay on the Fire Island chain. And as for Magdea, yeah, you're absolutely right. It completely sucks that the devs decided to throw Bagarth into the game and do nothing to at least even remotely talk about the sword. Yeah, that's one of the big places I believe that Heart of Thorns kind of dropped the ball. And lastly, and this will be a very short question because I kind of talked about it in an earlier one, Baron says, do you think that collections could ever be used to give us answers to the mysteries from in between the games? They could do a collection where you follow the diaries left by Livia. Great idea. I do want to see more story about Livia. Obviously, I would like to see some stuff about that gap between the two games, and especially on a topic like her, I think that would be really thrilling to a lot of players. But no, I don't think collections should be used for that. Yes, I want the content. I want stories. I want quests, okay? I want to actually experience and talk to people. We talked about this just a moment ago with the Legendary Collection. I thoroughly do believe that collections are not a worthy substitute to actual traditional questing. They're like this weird, thinly veiled excuse for quests that don't give us half of the interaction with NPCs around the world that we should have, or half of the satisfaction of actually being able to check something off on a list and say, yeah, that's that quest chain done. I don't want to see any more collections be used for these excuses to give us a little bit of lore as best we can. If the way we end up getting more story about Livia ends up through a goddamn collection, I would be really, really sad. Maybe you guys have something to defend collections. I would love to hear that in the comments. Maybe you got some questions about any of these topics or some other. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Do let me know what you think. Hope you have a wonderful day. It's good to be back, and I'll see you tomorrow.
What the heck are you doing?
I'm brushing my teeth. Grab the clam and move it to the right. Get through the puddle.